everybody, and we are live. It is the 15th of January and it is 2025. Can you imagine that? Can you believe that we're already a quarter of the way through the 21st century? How did that even happen? I remember the turn of the millennium like it was yesterday, but here we are 25 years in. It's the 15th of January 2025. I hope everybody had an amazing New Year's celebration. I know I certainly did. And it's so great to see so many of you here today. If you're out there in the audience, please write in the comments box. Tell us who you are, where you are, what you're doing. We're interested to see all your news, share all your news. I wonder how your New Year's resolutions are going. Steve Hoffman from Boston. Thoughts with our friends and colleagues in the Los Angeles area. Yeah, Stephen, I wanted to mention that today. Our thoughts go out to everybody in the Los Angeles area. And I know lots of people in the mobility and the accommodation space are busy helping out, reaching out with offers of assistance to people who've been so awfully affected by that. And we certainly do feel very much for everybody in that area. People coming in from all over the world, which is great. I mean, today, of course, is the 15th of January. We are less than a week now away from the inauguration of a new US president. So we're going to be touching a bit on the on what we might expect come the 20th of January. And then we're going to be talking about it even more next week. So, you know, a lot of interesting stuff going on, but everybody, you know how it is. Join in the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are. Oh, by the way, if you want to get your CPE codes, we offer you CPE codes. So you might want them from ERC. Many thanks to our good friends at ERC. Or you might want them from SHRM and for HRCI. So I'll leave those codes up there so you can see them for a few minutes. People coming in from all over the world. Today, we're going to be talking about women in global mobility. We did our top 250 list at the back end of last year. We're super excited. We've got two of the 250 on the show today, and we're going to feature another two next week as well. So that's the theme for the first couple of shows of this year. So some pretty exciting stuff happening. But let's find out what's been going on in the wonderful world of global mobility over the last, well, I say 7 days, but actually, obviously, it's a bit longer than that because it's our first show of 2025. Anyway, let's see what's been going on in the wonderful world of global mobility over the last 7 days. So there we have it. Congratulations to everyone who has been promoted. Congratulations to everyone who's got a new job. And there's loads of jobs out there. So if you are looking, there's loads of jobs there. And do reach out to the companies concerned. We just post them. We don't have any involvement in them, but they're posted up there. But if you've got a bit of news you want to share with the community, then reach out to us. Tell us whether you've been promoted. Tell us whether you've got a new job, or indeed tell us if you're hiring, and we'll see what we can do to give it a little bit of oxygen of publicity. Anyway, we're now going to move on. As I mentioned, and indeed, as everybody knows, by this time next week, the US will have a new president. We are expecting a slew of executive orders within days, if not minutes, of the new presidential inauguration. And who better to tell us all about what's going on from an immigration perspective over the next week or so, and what predictions are, but the amazing Julia Onslow-Cole from Fragment. So everybody, you know how it is. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome back for 2025, Julia Onslow-Cole. Hey, Julia, great to see you. Welcome back and Happy New Year.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you. It's wonderful to be back, and really excited to be talking about President-elect Donald Trump and what we should be expecting from particularly on the immigration landscape. And I think this is a theme that we're going to keep coming back to, Brian, during the course of this year, because it's going to have such an impact for all global mobility, but just generally on all businesses. So obviously we've got the inauguration coming up, and we have President-elect Donald Trump returning to the White House, and there is, as well as obviously immigration impacts, there is a complex and rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape, and that's really been characterized, and we've seen that particularly during January, diplomatic tensions, shifting in trade policies, and increasing protectionist policies around the world. This whole movement away from globalization to a more protectionist position started in about 2009, and it's really seeing that this is gathering pace. Now, there's been a lot in the press, and I know you, Brian, very kindly been sending me press releases too, as is everyone, on this kind of Musk v. Magna sort of debate, and it's significant media attention on what Elon Musk is saying, and then the Make America Great Again group. And I think that the feeling, certainly,
especially around H-1B visas, that's the
exactly. So I think the feeling, though, certainly at Fragment and with Eddie Raleigh and Bo Cooper and all of the great people that we have in our Washington office who are really following this very, very closely, is that this has been rather overblown in the media. And, whilst the media has portrayed it as, Elon Musk on one side really pushing for H-1Bs, and then the other side of the Make America Great Again being very conservative, that's not really how I think it is, and that's not how Fragment is seeing it. I think if you look at the candidates that Trump picked very early on for these key immigration positions in policy and homeland security, you will see that he actually appointed people who, in the case of Stephen Miller, had already been participating in the last administration on immigration policy, and they're all people who are very much of the camp of wanting to get immigration under control. And I think that the theme is that there is a unified approach, because whilst they realize that in some cases, it's very important to bring in outside talent, and that's very necessary for the American economy, on the other hand, there's going to be a much more increased focus in the integrity of the systems and the integrity of the programs. So that's what we, feel at Fragment.
Does that mean the focus will be more on undocumented migrants rather than?
No, I'm just really talking today about H-1Bs and more corporate moves. But I'm just saying that I think that there has been a feeling that perhaps not everybody that has come in on those visas maybe has sort of hit the high test that they should really have hit, and that there'll be this much more focus on, you know, what are the skills that these people have that are coming in? Is all the paperwork in order? Have they gone through the right processes? Is the processes are such that no one has actually lost out from you know, from the allocation of these visas? So, you know, we do expect enhanced vetting and tougher adjudication. This focus we expect on fairness in terms of wages, and, you know, big scrutiny under the national interest waiver. Also, we do think there'll be travel bans, and they'll come quite quickly, but these will be mainly for people who are coming from countries where there's no reciprocity and openness about security. So it's very difficult for the US to vet these people. So that is really on the US side, just very high level, few things to look out for. But obviously, the Trump administration is going to have an enormous impact on countries outside of the US. And we see this majorly in the debate about tariffs. So I don't think anyone feels that everything that has been said so far about tariffs is actually going to be implemented. I mean, they're eye-watering numbers in terms of tariffs. And I do think it's likely to be much more of a negotiation tactic. And I think one thing that's quite helpful to look at in tariffs is what happened in the last Trump administration, where countries that were more amenable to some negotiation actually fared quite well in tariffs. And I think a good example of that would be Japan, where the then Prime Minister Abe was actually very conciliatory, and there was some really positive outcomes for Japan in relation to tariffs. I think it's a little harder for Europe to be as conciliatory, in the sense that, you know, the European economy is struggling at the current time. And in addition, they know that there's going to be less support from America for defense, and that they need to spend eye-watering amounts of money on defense. And I think the sorts of things that the US would like, which is, you know, more things like a deregulation on media, etc., that's not something that the European community is likely to agree with. So I think that they might fare less well with tariffs. But obviously this is having an impact on immigration, as companies are looking perhaps to change their supply chain, move manufacturing out of Europe, perhaps fill up their manufacturing space in the US. I think it also flags up a concern about compliance, and that's a big theme that we'll talk about this year. Really important to have your programs, not just in the US, but globally compliant, particularly with a rise of the far right, where, you know, an anti-immigration rhetoric is in the background. And finally, I think just need to be very concerned about security, and still remind you that we do have a number of world conflicts that aren't settled, particularly Middle East and Russia, Ukraine, and be very mindful of refreshing your crisis management plans. Thank you.
Okay. Julia, thank you so much for that. It is just the start of a very long conversation, which I know we're going to come back to many times over the course of 2025. But as ever, thank you so much for your wonderful update. We're now going to move on to our tax update. So everybody, you know how it goes. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's say a big, big thank you to Julia Onslow-Cole, and to welcome to our stage our tax experts from Vialto Partners. Hey, Julie, Amy Lynn, welcome to The View from the Top. Happy New Year. Great to see you both. So, Julie, where are you today? I know you've got a bit of a Vialto thing going at the moment.
We are. Amy Lynn and I are both in Nashville, Tennessee, enjoying a wonderful conference. We're having a Vialto Americas conference. So we're seeing our colleagues from all over the Americas. It's awesome.
Cool. I bet you're listening to quite a bit of music as you go from...
A lot of country music. Yes. Lots of live, really good country music here. Yeah, it's been a great time.
Okay. Well, we have some music of our own to play later as we bring up our queens of global mobility in a few minutes. But let's talk tax, okay? And Amy Lynn, welcome back to the show. I know you've been on before. And where in the world are we going today, and what are we talking about?
We're going to Canada, and we don't usually pick one particular country to talk about, but this is a little bit of a unique situation in terms of their legislation around equity compensation. So just for a bit of background, Canada allows employers to grant equity to employees, whether they're stock options or restricted stock units. It's generally been a relatively easy country to manage from an equity perspective, but there have been some changes in recent years. In 2021, Canada implemented some changes that limited kind of the favorable treatment that stock options receive. So the one unique part about what Canada does, if you have a restricted stock unit, the full amount of the gain is taxable at vesting. But for stock options, only 50% of the gain was taxable. So stock options were a much more favorable vehicle to give to employees. A few years ago, as I mentioned, they changed that legislation to put a cap on how much of the stock options are eligible for that deduction. So companies have already went through an exercise of kind of looking at that and seeing how that impacts its employees. However, in April of 2024, there was new legislation proposed that basically adjusted this from the 50% exclusion to basically a 33% exclusion. So going from a half to a third. And so why that's impactful is not only because it could mean more tax for the employees, but it was going to be applicable for any stock benefits realized after June 24th, 2024. So months have went by. There's obviously been some changes in the Canadian government, and this legislation has still not been approved.
I noticed that bit.
It is. Legislation still not approved. And then early in January, they said the current session of Parliament was going to be held in March of 2025, but we're still not expecting this legislation to go away, and they are still expecting it to be approved. The tricky part is, as I said,
Trudeau stepping down won't make any difference.
That's what they're saying right now, that we still think this one's going to go forward because it is a revenue raiser, right? It would increase the amount of money that the government's going to receive. The tricky part for our clients is that it's still having an effective date for any gains realized from June 2024. So what does that mean from an employee perspective, right? Calendar year is done. We're in 2025, as you said. We're getting near tax return time. So what do we do from that perspective? And so there's really two takeaways for people to consider today. One is companies are making a decision whether to continue withholding based on the 50% exclusion, which could potentially mean people are under withheld, or they can withhold based on the 33% exclusion, which means they might have over withheld if it doesn't get passed. So there's a little bit of a decision to be made there. Right now we're not expecting any penalties for under withholding because the legislation is not finalized, but something to consider, particularly for employees who might have to reconcile the difference. The other piece, which is important more from an employee perspective, Canadians get T4s, right? It's equivalent to the US W-2, some of the other forms that we see globally. The interesting part is the 2024 tax forms are being released at the end of the month, and they're including new boxes reflecting this change in legislation. So they're having different reporting requirements if your stock options were exercised before June 25th or after. So even though the legislation is not paid and we still don't have good guidance to give to the employers, it appears that the reporting is looking for this difference. So I think this is more of a stay tuned, but also kind of be aware that there's going to be some changes there. Stock options are still advantageous for the most part, but there could be differences in how much is taxable and how much should be reported.
Okay, so thank you so much for that, Amy Lynn. I mean, that's an important update. As you say, it's a bit watch this space, stay tuned. But it's a big area, and we really, really appreciate that update. So we're now going to move on. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage my colleague Beth Niels from Benevo, and we've got a really important announcement that we're going to be making. So I'm going to hand over to Beth on that in a moment. So everybody, you know how it works. Let's thank Julie and Amy Lynn for that wonderful tax update. Let's welcome Beth to the stage in the time-honored fashion of hitting the heart button, hitting the like button, and hitting the applause button.
Happy New Year, Brian.
Year. It's beginning not to feel like the new year anymore, isn't it? We're just already, halfway through the first month. But
we can still celebrate. It's all good to be back.
Exactly. May I be the last to wish you a Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, big news. Tell us about the big new announcement.
Yeah, so it's great to be back. And today I wanted to share a little bit about Benevo's new feature, our Immigration Management Hub. Some of you might already have seen this. Yeah. That's right. Some of you might already have seen it. We've been sending out those emails. We've been all over LinkedIn. It's so exciting. So what is it? Some of you might ask. Well, this is a game changer for managing those sponsored workforces. It simplifies immigration processes, irrespective of which immigration provider you're using, by putting everything in one place. So it's integrating with your
these are people who may not actually be assignees or relocating. They may just be people who are working for you but need visas.
Exactly. So these are people, foreign local hires, locally hired foreign nationals, who are really difficult to track. And actually Global Mobility never used to be responsible for them, but now more and more we're seeing that anything that has to do with visas, immigration status updates, passport expiry seems to be coming under mobility. And this is a solution to make it really easy to track them all in one place, get those cost certainties, budgeting, and whether you use it as a standalone solution or as part of the full Benevo platform, it's creating that single source of truth. Really exciting. Get in touch. We'd really love to tell you more about it.
Okay, so thank you so much for that, Beth. By the way, I should have mentioned earlier in my introduction is that, and I know, Beth, you very much helped us with this, is that we are available on LinkedIn and YouTube, but also we are available as a podcast on Spotify. So if you want to hear us as a podcast, do remember to go to Spotify, and we're there. But also, of course, we are on LinkedIn and YouTube, and indeed all the recordings are available on the Benevo website. We're now going to move on to meet two of our wonderful global mobility women leaders. We've now started calling them the Queens of Mobility, and we have a catchy song to go with it. What we're going to do, as we bring them on stage, we've got Jotimi from Genpact, and we've got Jane Rhodes from Scania. And we're going to, as we introduce them, we're going to play a little video that shows half of the top 250. So 125 of the top 250. And then we'll be showing the second half next week on the next show. And what's interesting is when people nominated people, they put up, they said things about why they had nominated. And some of the words are so significant and important. We thought we'd actually share some of the reasons that people got nominated. So everybody, please get your dancing shoes on. I know we've got Julie and Amy Lynn in Nashville, so we've got a little bit of country for you. So let's listen in as we meet the Queens of Mobility and get hopping and bopping and dancing as we play this.
Oh, ooh, 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 oh, moving mountains, moving hearts, across the oceans, playing our parts. These women lead, yeah, they shine so bright. 250 stars light up the night. They show the world what vision can be. Strategic minds setting us free. They inspire us, keeping dreams alive. Moving the globe with passion and drive. They're the queens of mobility, changing the world so gracefully. With a smile and a plan, taking every stand, leading the way with a helping hand. Oh, oh, they innovate, they shine. they keep us rolling. Global leaders, their power's golden.
Hey, Jane Jotamai, welcome to the show. Great to have you here, and congratulations on being voted Queens of Mobility, or more technically, our top 250 women in global mobility.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
I can't stop laughing at the tune. It's quite an introduction. I don't know if we can live up to that.
We've got to carry on that Nashville theme. And Jotamai, I'm very, very pleased that everybody in the world seems to call you JC, which I think I'm going to find a lot easier than this time.
Of course.
We've got JC and JR here today. So anyway, so let's just talk. Let's introduce yourselves. So we'll start with you, JC. Just tell us a bit about yourself and a bit about Genpact.
So first of all, thank you, Brian. Thank you for having us here. Talking about myself, I'm a chartered accountant by profession. It's an equivalent of CPA in the US. And I started my journey as a consultant with one of the big fours, then moved to industry. Genpact was my first experience with industry, and I continue to be there for last 10 plus years now. From a Genpact's perspective, Genpact was a spin-off from GE in 2000, right? So now we've 2005, and now it's our 20th anniversary that we're celebrating. We started as a BPO organization, but we've evolved, and we now are very proud to project ourselves as a solutions provider company, which is focused on providing business outcomes.
And give us an idea of the size of your program. How many people would you move one way or another in a typical year?
So I would say it would be somewhere in the range of 800 plus people if I have to exclude business visitors. If I include business visitors, it would be somewhere around 1,500 plus a year.
And business visitors falls within your remit?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so it's a chunky number. I'll just switch over to you, Jade. Tell us a bit about yourself and your background and your company.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever everyone else is in the world. I'm Jane Rhodes. I'm head of global mobility at Scania. Scania is a Swedish headquartered company, for those that don't know. And it's slightly older. It's over 130 years old. So it's a very traditional manufacturing company of commercial vehicles, trucks, premium brand trucks. Our purpose is to drive the shift towards a sustainable transport system, which is very Swedish. It's a very environmentally driven company. I know that sounds odd for a heavy duty truck company, but that is the purpose and vision of the organization. I'm clearly not Swedish, so that's maybe something to add. I live in the UK. I don't live in Sweden, and I manage a team globally, traveling regularly backwards and forwards to Sweden. I have a team in Brazil, some members in the UK, and quite a lot in Sweden. So really international team. And I've been here for 2.5 years. I manage, in my remit is global mobility, permanent relocations, foreign local hires, which Beth just alluded to, and business travel management also is in my remit.
How many cases would you deal with in a typical year? How many people do you move?
Within global mobility or across all of those?
Across all, yeah.
So I think we have over 50,000 business trips a year in 22 managed markets. Still some business that aren't, some markets that aren't in the managed program. We have roughly about 500 expats globally around the world. Most of which are a long-term assignment, so quite a traditional program of traditional expat assignments for 3 to 5 years. And we have roughly about 600 foreign local hires, and it can range per year in Sweden, and about 300 permanent relocations to Sweden each year as well. So quite a big program.
Okay, so I mean, that's fascinating. We've got two companies, very different industries, but really sort of, big programs, lots of business trips. Now, you both work remotely. And I suppose we're talking about women in the workplace. Obviously, it doesn't have to be women. But how important is remote working, is or flexible working to you both?
I'll go
John?
first.
Yeah.
So flexibility per se, remote working I think, was completely alien to us as an organization and to us as a culture pre-COVID. Uh, and after COVID hit, I think the dynamics for everybody changed from a personal perspective and the personal side of things, and which is where the concept of work from home kicked in. For me personally, it's really, really important, Brian, because I stay with my parents, and it's imperative that I need to stay with them to take care of them. And if I really have to travel every day to office, it just gets a little difficult to manage.
Okay, so you're a carer, a parental carer at the
Yes,
same
indeed.
time. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to avoid stereotypes here, but it is quite often the women in society who end up doing the caring roles. So that's something that has fallen on you. I'm sorry to hear that. Obviously, your parents must have some health issues, but I'm sorry to hear that. But so how does that work? I mean, when you have to do a business trip or something, or you have to go into the office, how does that work?
So I have siblings. We're all sisters. Uh, but we swap places, so we manage each other's work. We take that burden. So when somebody has to be home, then the other one can travel, and vice versa.
Okay. And Jane, tell us about yourself and flexible work, because you're in the north of Scotland, aren't you? You're up in the Highlands.
I am indeed, which is not exactly the epicenter of global mobility activity.
So you're close to the Loch Ness Monster, are you? Is that
I'm very close to the Loch Ness Monster, indeed. Never seen him, but yes, apparently he's in there.
I'm sure there's a mobility joke out there, and I'm going to ask the audience. Okay, we're looking for Loch Ness Monster and mobility jokes. Okay, we'll put up the best comments on screen.
Exactly. Any jokes welcome. No, so I mean, I've been working remotely for many years. When I was at Unilever, in the early 2000s, I was a remote home-based employee, and we used to joke even then that mobility could be done from the moon, because your stakeholders are never in one place, the people are never in one place. You spend most of your time on the phone or on Teams calls anyway, and I've always been a real a supporter of that flexible workspace, because that's how you get the best out of your people. I mean, I think I said this to you earlier in the week. Someone wise once told me that lazy people will be lazy wherever they are. So it doesn't matter, this presenteeism culture that we had, I was always sort of fighting against that anyway. But obviously COVID has brought that full circle and made it more conformist in our society to work like that. So when I was approached about the role at Scania and asked if I could move to Sweden, I said, well, no, because I've just moved to the Highlands of Scotland from the south of England, from Sussex, which is quite a big way, if those of you know. But I can do the job if you're interested in me working remotely. And of course, that takes a leap of faith from the company and from your boss to trust, sometimes more than they're comfortable with, to have you working, especially leading in such a global team in such a strategic role. So I'm very grateful for that. And I think without that, I don't think some people wouldn't be in the roles that they're in today and have the leadership opportunities they have today. So as leaders, we have a responsibility to leave the shirt better than we found it. And we have to, role model that with our own teams and make sure that we're open to that as well.
Okay, so flexible working is important for you both. I mean, let me put it like this. Would you take a job if you couldn't work flexibly? I mean, how much of a deal breaker is it for both of you?
Big one.
Big one.
Yeah, 100%. It's impossible, where I live as well. And I have children that I'm responsible for. So in the same way as being a caregiver, I wouldn't entertain a role if there wasn't an element of flexibility. I mean, and JC says that, you agree, right, JC?
Absolutely. I think for me, like I said, it's a big one. At this stage in life, I think my priority is my priority is balanced between work and the caregiver role, and I really can't choose between both of them, choose one of them out of the two.
Okay, I mean that's really important, and we haven't really talked about caregiving and that role, elder care, on the show before. Maybe that's something we should go into in terms of looking after children. In fact, we've got a show on that in 2 weeks' time, 29th of January. For anybody who's interested in that whole area of parental leave, we're doing a show specifically on that. But actually, that is interesting because, I mean, Jane, you work for a Swedish company, and I think the cultures are quite different, aren't they, regarding, you know, parental leave in different parts of the world? I mean, what's your take on that? Because presumably you're seeing it a bit in your role now.
Yeah, hugely. I mean, you know, as I said, I've only been here for 2.5 years, but what a learning curve to work in again. I've worked in a German company, an Anglo-Dutch company, and now in a Swedish company where, you know, in the labour law, it's work balance is enshrined, work environment is enshrined in the labour law in Sweden. So when you talk about work balance, it's a regular thing that is monitored. And we look at it. So if it's just part of the DNA, and then of course you also have very generous cultural parental leave norms, which are equally balanced between men and women. So it's a very you know, I don't profess to be an expert in Sweden, of course not. I'm not Swedish, but it's a very egalitarian culture where men and women are entitled to the same parental leave. They share it and they co-parent, and they go off and take that leave and take a year off, and then the next one will go and take a year off, and they can have that up until the child is 4, I believe. So it really is an egalitarian culture that means that women in particular don't have to stop their careers. It's equally just the same as the men that take off the leave to look after the children. So I think it's a real example of what we could have in society.
Yeah, it absolutely fascinates me because if I talk about India, the maternity leave is restricted to 6 months. The paternity leave per se is just 2 weeks.
Yeah, it is amazing how it varies. We're going to be getting into that a lot more on the show in 2 weeks' time. So anybody who's interested in that show, I think it's probably the first time ever anyone has done a session specifically on maternity leave in global, or family leave, parental leave, call it what you will, in global mobility. And I think that will be a fascinating show. We've actually got 3 guests on that show. One who is currently on maternity leave, one who has just finished a maternity cover, and one who has been on maternity leave and is now doing maternity cover. So 3 great global mobility leaders talking about mobility and maternity or parental leave. Anyway, I want to move on. In that opening video, people said why they had nominated people, and there were certain words that came across quite often when they were nominating people. The sort of words that I was seeing, I saw the word passion, I saw the word collaboration, I saw the word innovation, I saw the word trailblazer. Tell us a bit about that and what you see. I mean, what do you think are the most important characteristics you see in mobility leadership, and are any of these more likely or different in some way with women leaders as opposed to male leaders? Jane, do you want to jump in on that first, and then JC?
Yeah, of course I can. I'm just practicing the Swedish culture of listen with big ears and small mouths. I'm trying to.
Let's just take that. I love that. Okay, just tell because that's a Swedish thing. Tell us what's the Swedish culture. Let's just do that again.
Listen with big ears and small mouths. So really listen in to everybody around the table, right? Be collaborative.
Collaborative, which is one of the words that came up. In fact, it probably, if I did a word cloud, that was probably the biggest word that came out in terms of our wonderful women leaders in global mobility was collaborative. So I said, in that,
and I think that's where it's. It plays out, right? Because, you know, generally speaking, you know, women tend to have more soft skills, more sort of empathy, more kind of like, you know, I don't want to do males and injustice here, but emotional intelligence. So I think that's why there's a lot. We talked about why is there so many women in this sphere. Well, traditionally that's where we've gone to, because that's where our skills can be utilized. And we also talked, you know, previously about, well, you know, is it also because we weren't given the same opportunities in school with STEM subjects and stuff, and it wasn't a field that we went into? Maybe that will change going forwards. I mean, I really hope that we have more men coming into global mobility. You know, it would give us a definitely great balance. I have men in my team, and it gives the whole team a balance of, it's not just about diversity, it's about inclusion and making sure there's every voice and every mindset around the table that can come up with the right decisions and the right ideas, because, you know, that's how we get improvements, if we all can collaborate and contribute.
And JC, tell us a bit about, you know, the word passion that came out there. I mean, how important is passion in global mobility?
You can't survive without it. I think everybody who's in global mobility industry would agree that every day it is such a dynamic word. Every day something's changing. Every day you have a different kind of a problem statement, because we are connected to people and everybody's personal situation is different. If you aren't passionate about mobility as a discipline, which obviously focuses on solving problems for people in a compliant manner, so if you're not passionate about it, you are bound to get bogged down. So passion, anybody who's self-driven and passionate is the one who will survive in the global mobility world.
Okay,
yeah,
so if you were,
I just wanted to add, actually, I think, you know, passion's important in any job that you do, but actually in this job you get sucked in, right? And it's really a hard job to leave, because of exactly what you're saying, that you're passionate about the world that we live in. And that's why I think you're absolutely right.
so if you were interviewing someone to be a global mobility leader in your organization or another organization, or dare I say it, to take your job in years to come, what would be the qualities that you'd be looking for? Are those the sorts of things we're talking about, or are there other qualities you'd say, wow, that's, you know, that's what I'm really looking for in somebody, to be a true inspirational global mobility leader like you two?
Yeah, patience would be another one, and understanding, yeah. And being, you know, not being afraid to push boundaries, because I think that's, you know, not to be conformist. I think if you're a conformist, you to stand still in this industry is not a good thing to do. So we have to keep pushing the boundaries, changing, looking at innovative ways to do what we do, rather than just accepting the norm. So I think those are also important things.
I would add to what Jane said. So everything that you said, those qualities, and I'll add on to it, thinking out of the box. Like I said a while back, every situation, every problem statement is different. And like Jane said, we can't confirm, we can't have a blanket approach to everything. So you have to think out of the box. You have to think innovatively. The other piece I would say is, person has to be great at communication. There are so many changes in mobility, and you have to keep the business, the employees abreast. So it's always better to over communicate than not communicate at all.
So communication skills are right up there. I think Jeremy Chandler said trust. I think, I'm not sure, Jeremy, you mean the ability to trust your team, or the ability of the team to trust you? I'm not sure. But tell us about your relationship. I know in Scania, you told me that one of your values at Scania was customer first. And how does that relate for both of you into mobility, the idea of being customer centric as an organization? And presumably your customers are the people who are you're moving.
Yeah, and we shouldn't really be doing anything if it doesn't add value to the customer. So that's where we start with everything that we do. We start with the business need. So and not just the business need, but also listening into we did a CX design. We worked with our CX team and did our customer journey mapping last year to look at the moments that matter and the pain points, because actually that's the voice of the customer that we should be listening into, and then designing our way forward from that, rather than just my professional opinion of what we should do or my team's professional opinion. Everything should be driven by the customer first, whether that's the business need. They might have a need to open a new factory somewhere and the challenges that come with that, or there's a challenge in a different location. So that is customer first for us, is and we're on a transformation journey. I'm not saying we've got it right as yet, but it's definitely the way that we want to drive everything that we do in terms of our new ways of working and our team structure, and of course in the work that we do, in the improvement work, to make mobility a better department and a better service provider to the business.
And JC, from your perspective, making mobility a better department, to pick up on what Jane was saying, how would you plan to go about that? What's your vision for making mobility a better place?
Better place for the customers, right? We're looking at the customers.
Yes,
right.
And the customers being the people who are moving.
Okay, so I think it's anything that you have from a policy standpoint. For me, that has to be flexible. You can't have a blanket approach for everything, and it has to somewhere give you the thumb rules which will govern the decision making, but not be straight jacketed in terms of what can and cannot be done. You have to be open minded, like Jane said a while back that we have to be customer centric. Everything stops at business needs. It's business needs, and for the stakeholder needs. So stakeholders for us would be the people who we're moving. So at the end of the day, what is important is we cater to their requirements and provide solutions, which, and our policies should be centered or should be flexible enough to cater to various situations rather than being straitjacketed.
Okay, I want to sort of move on the conversation and get into this concept of a glass ceiling. Now, I did a poll on this a while ago, and we were discussing this earlier, but it's a bit, there's something here I'm trying to square the circle. Is that the term glass ceiling was coined back in 1978, and I asked the question in a LinkedIn poll: how much is that still a reality in now? How much is there still a glass ceiling? And the answer was 74% of people who responded said it's still very much a reality. And only 11% said there's no glass ceiling today. So the vast majority said there is either a glass ceiling or there's a bit of a glass ceiling. And only 11% said there's none. But then I asked the question, in your organization, is the overall head of global mobility male or female? And the answer there was, it was 74% of respondents said that the head of global mobility was female. So the question I'm trying to get my head around, I'll be interested in not your views, but the audience's views, is how much is there a glass ceiling today in our industry, given actually that 3/4, certainly according to that poll, 3/4 of mobility leaders are actually female. So has the glass ceiling finally been shattered forever? Question two. I'm asking the audience. Jane, I'm going to ask you and JC. So Jane, I'll give you the talking stick on that one.
Yeah, this is a pet passion of mine, so I'm happy to talk forever about it. I think for me, when we looked at those numbers, we explored, well, if 74% of women leaders in mobility are women, then why did they still feel that there's a glass ceiling? Because invariably there's nowhere else to go. I mean, I am the head of global mobility. That there's no one else to be that. So I've broken the glass ceiling, and so for me, when people answer that question, the question I have is, are you answering it from women in leadership perspective? Because of course I feel that is still there, and certainly we see in Scania within our very production manufacturing led business that there is still a glass ceiling when it comes to leadership of women, but certainly not. I wouldn't answer yes in global mobility when you look at those numbers. So it's a conundrum. I agree with you, Brian. It's a bit of a conundrum from both of those polls.
Okay, and JC, what's your perspective on this conundrum?
I'd agree. I'd agree, because if you look at global mobility as an industry, uh, then the diversity percentage in global mobility itself, I think it is beyond what is the industry perspective. I think when people answered on the glass ceiling, they had a generic perspective in terms of the industry as a whole and not global mobility per se, because the percentage and the proportion here is far beyond the generic numbers.
Okay. I want to come on to another subject, and that's the subject of supporting the next generation of women leaders. So, as I said, that glass ceiling in our industry is either shattered or very severely dented, depending on how far you want to take that analogy forward. But what about the next generation? I'll take the question in two parts, actually. And I'll start with you, if I may, JC. To what extent did you have female role models when you were going into global mobility? And the other part is looking towards the next generation. Is there anything you are actively doing to help develop the next generation of female leaders in mobility?
Okay. So I'll say that when I entered global mobility, I actually entered global mobility by chance. I learned it on ground, on the job. But whilst learning the job, all my leaders were females. So if you say that I was idolizing one, that would be wrong, because each and every leader was a female that I was working with. Um Going to the next question, how I'm helping, again, going to my team. We From a tax perspective, I lead the tax functions. From a tax perspective, we are a small team of 4 members, of which 3 are females. So I have the golden opportunity to groom my team members and bring them up the curve and create future mobility leaders.
Okay.
I would
And
not say I wouldn't do that for the male member. I would equally do it for him,
yeah,
but no biases there.
I take that point. But Jane, I mean, from your perspective, did you have mentors when you were starting off in this industry? And what lessons have you learned that you'd like to pass on down to the next generation of mobility leader?
I think it's a very interesting topic, because if I can go back to the previous question, did I have any female leaders? The answer is no, not really, because most of the men, because mobility, obviously, we know tends to report into reward. So I think there's a flip question here, that mostly in reward, it tends to be men. So most of my bosses were men, until I landed at Scania. And it's been women ever since, and I'm grateful for that, because they've been fantastic women. But I think they would have been fantastic men, maybe, if they'd have been men as well. So I'm not genderizing that, but I think role models. I think I'm a great believer in you make your own way and you make your own way forward. So my role model is myself, to keep going and keep pursuing what I want to do and go where I want to go, and accept the opportunities that come to me. And I think I hope that I can be a role model to others, because you should just not accept no as an answer, and you should keep going, and you should hope that those behind you will support you, whether you're male, female, or whatever you identify as. And by building teams, I'm a great believer in building empowered teams through trust and autonomy and open communications and recognition and developing and having fun at the heart of that, because it's important that we create that. And I'm a big my great belief is that you should leave the shirt better than you found it. I said that before. I come from a sporting background, and comes from that belief that you're only as good as your bench strength. So if you don't develop your bench, then you've got nothing to fall onto, and you can't take any decisions or do anything by yourself. I say to my team, I've got one brain, and in this room we've got 20 brains. So really, come on, we should co-create and make the solution between us. So I think that's how you develop and you bring people forward, by being that sort of leader, and open and transparent, and not being a command and control, which is obviously the old style of leadership that I think perhaps we saw in the 80s and 90s when we were first coming into the market, where people were very much in that command and control mentality.
Okay, we're getting towards the end of the show, but we did talk about the fact that you're from Inverness, Jane, so you're close to Nessie, and we've had a whole bunch
Has anyone found him?
We have come some. No one's found him. We have had some jokes coming in, so we'll start sharing these. Nessie's like, or she's always willing to take a deep dive into a topic.
I like it.
Worse. Why did Nessie take a global splash?
That's really bad. Peter's one of my managers in my team. I'm going to have a word with him after this.
Oh, bless Peter. Why did the Loch Ness Monster become a global mobility specialist? Because it's great at relocating without anybody noticing. Oh, great. The monster truly is a remote worker, from Pat Jurgens. Why did the Loch Ness Monster refuse to pay tax? Because it didn't want to be caught in a net of bureaucracy. Oh, these just get worse and worse. Why did it around the world for work? Because it heard there were plenty of senior positions available. Oh dear!
I'm really glad we've managed to bring a sense of humour to the day. Right?
If you can't bring Nessie into mobility, then what sort of world are we in today?
He's a global icon. There we go.
Absolutely. Maybe that should be our. We did actually have a serious question in here, which we only got a couple minutes left. But Thursday asked, how critical is it to have a CPA qualification to lead global mobility, or indeed any qualification? Well, you've only got about a minute to answer this, but what do you think? How important is it to have a professional qualification to lead mobility?
Personally, I need to answer this because it's another pet hate of mine. I think it's irrelevant. What's relevant is the core competencies of an individual. We talked about those soft skills earlier. When recruiting, I wouldn't look at whether you've got a qualification or not. I'd look at who you are, the fit within my team, whether I think you are the right, have the right personality for the job. And of course, whether you've got some professional not qualifications, but some work experience. I wouldn't look at all of these letters after a word. And it's a pet hate of mine when I see companies recruiting saying, oh, you must have Big Four background because, there's a bit of tax. Well, I'm not a tax lawyer and I've done okay for myself. And I know what I need to know about tax and when to ring the tax advisors. So I think that those can be, for younger people coming in, they feel like they've got to get it.
I always feel you don't have to know all the answers. You just have to know the questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And JC, I know obviously you have come from a CPA background, but what's your view? How, is that essential?
I think, I was just about to say I'll disagree slightly with Jane. When it comes to core tax work, I think it does make sense if you have that kind of a background, but mobility per se as a function is not focused only on tax. It's multifaceted. So if you are a mobility professional as a whole, I don't think these qualifications matter. You learn by experience, you learn on the job, and with every new day, the learnings that you had in the previous day, they become redundant because the laws and regulations and this business situation is changing so fast. So if you're doing core tax, I would say you would need it. But if you're a general global mobility professional, then it's all about learning.
Okay, well, we're pretty much out of time now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring on our wonderful producer, Tally, Beth, who's telling us all about the immigration hub. Julie and Amy Lynn and Julia, unfortunately, cannot be with us now. They've all gone on to other meetings. Next week, we are back. We're going to be talking about, we're going to be meeting two more wonderful global mobility women leaders, Naima Alvi from SLB, formerly Schlumberger, and Moya Kimber from Oracle. So two great companies, two great leaders. That is us for the week. We are back this time next week, and indeed we'll be in a new world with a new US president. So we will be getting updates on what's going on with those inevitable executive orders that are coming out immediately. So everybody, until then, we wish you all a very, very good week, and it's wonderful to see you all, and thank everybody. And as Tara says, great way to start 2025, and let the good times continue. Take care, everybody, and goodbye. Bye.
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 Bye.